above the Pacific Ocean, a Boeing 737 cruises smoothly at 24,000 feet. Passengers sip their drinks, flight attendants serve meals, everything is normal. Then, suddenly, boom! An explosive blast rips away 18 feet of the airplane's roof. Passengers are now staring directly at the open sky. One flight attendant gets sucked out into the clouds. The cockpit fills with debris and deafening wind. And here's the craziest part. This shredded flying tube somehow landed safely with almost everyone alive. How well do you really know the world's most common jetliner? That plane you've probably flown on dozens of times? The one you barely notice at the airport? Yeah, that boring-looking Boeing 737 has secrets, dark secrets, incredible secrets, secrets that will blow your mind. We're talking about a plane with a built-in periscope hidden under the carpet, a 737 modified with a fighter jet's nose grafted onto its face, and a software system that Boeing literally forgot to tell pilots about, a mistake that killed 346 people. Stay strapped in, because these 20 weird facts get crazier with each one. And that story about the roof ripping off? That's number one, and trust me, you need to hear how it ends. This is the Boeing 737 like you've never seen it before. Let's go. Fact 20. Older than the moon landing. The very first Boeing 737 took off on April 9, 1967. Let that sink in. 1967. That's before humans landed on the moon. Before Star Wars came out, before handheld calculators existed. This plane is almost 60 years old, and it's still the backbone of modern aviation. Your smartphone is probably only a few years old and already outdated. But the 737, still going strong after nearly 6 decades. That's not normal. That's not even close to normal. And it's our first hint that this airplane is way more interesting than it looks. Fact 19. First customer wasn't American. Here's something that shocked everyone back in the day. The Boeing 737 is an American plane, built by an American company in Seattle, Washington. So naturally, the first airline to fly it was, wait for it, German. That's right. Lufthansa, a German airline, was the very first customer to operate the 737 in February 1968. The first time an American jetliner's launch customer was foreign. Boeing took a massive risk letting a European carrier be the face of their new plane. But it worked. And it proved from day one that the 737 was going to be a global phenomenon, not just an American success story. Fact 18. Nearly cancelled early on. Now here's where the story gets dramatic. In 1970, just 3 years after the 737's first flight, Boeing almost killed the entire program. Only 37 orders. That's all they had. 37 measly orders in 3 years. The 737 was a commercial disaster. Airlines didn't want it. Boeing was hemorrhaging money. Executives were ready to pull the plug and scrap the whole thing. Boeing had to make a choice. Cancel the 737 and cut their losses, or bet everything on a plane nobody seemed to want. They even scraped a planned supersonic transport project just to keep the 737 alive. It was a massive gamble, and it could have gone very, very wrong. Fact 17. Record-breaking bestseller. But it didn't go wrong. It went spectacularly right. Fast forward a few decades, and the Boeing 737 became the best-selling commercial airliner in human history. Over 10,000 units produced by 2018. Guinness World Records officially certified it as the most produced jet airliner ever built. From 37 orders and near death to over 10,000 planes sold. That's one of the most incredible comebacks in business history. The plane Boeing almost cancelled became the plane that saved Boeing. Remember that the next time someone tells you to give up on something. Fact 16. 1 in 4 airliners is a 737. Let me put this in perspective. Roughly 25% of all commercial passenger planes in the entire world are Boeing 737s. 1 in 4. Every 4th airliner you see taking off, landing, or parked at the gate is a 737. Look up at the sky right now. There's probably one flying overhead. This plane isn't just popular, it's absolutely dominant. And that dominance is hiding a whole lot of weird stories we're about to uncover. Fact 15. Constantly in the skies. Want your mind blown? At any given moment, right now, there are approximately 2,800 Boeing 737s in the air, somewhere on Earth. And here's the really insane part. On average, a 737 takes off or lands every 1.5 seconds somewhere on the planet. Think about that. By the time you finish reading this sentence, a 737 just lifted off somewhere, and another one just landed, and another one just took off again. The 737 never sleeps. It's always flying. Always. Fact 14. Billions of people flown. Cumulatively, over 22 billion passengers have flown on Boeing 737 since 1967. Let me say that again. 22 billion people. That's 3 times the entire population of Earth. If every human alive today had flown on a 737, we'd each have done it 3 times. That's how many people this one airplane design has carried through the skies. No other aircraft even comes close. Fact 13. Split scimitar winglets. In 2014, Boeing added these weird shark fin-like extensions to the 737's wingtips called split scimitar winglets. You've probably seen them. They curve upward and look kind of cool in a sci-fi way. But they're not just for looks. These winglets improve fuel efficiency by 2.2%, which saves airlines millions of dollars per year. It's wild that Boeing is still improving and innovating on a design from the 1960s. The 737 keeps evolving, keeps getting better, even after 50+ years. A scimitar, by the way, is a curved sword. So yeah, your plane has swords on its wings. Sort of. Fact 12. Eyebrow windows. Here's a weird one that most people never notice. Early Boeing 737s had extra little windows above the main cockpit windows. They look like eyebrows, which is exactly what pilots called them. These eyebrow windows served a real purpose back in the 1960s. Pilots could use them for celestial navigation, literally tracking stars, and for extra visibility during sharp turns. But here's the thing. Most people today have never even noticed them because Boeing eliminated them on newer models. Too much glare, too much maintenance. But if you ever see an old 737 with 4 cockpit windows instead of 2, now you know why. It's a relic from an era when pilots actually navigated by looking at stars. Fact 11. Rough field OPS. You think jet airliners need nice, smooth, paved runways, right? Wrong. The Boeing 737-200 could be equipped with something called a gravel kit that allowed it to take off and land on dirt and gravel runways, unpaved runways, in the middle of nowhere. Boeing added special deflectors on the landing gear and engines to prevent rocks and debris from getting sucked in and destroying everything. This meant the 737 could fly to remote locations in Alaska, northern Canada, and other places with no real airports. A jet airliner landing on gravel, like a bush plane. Absolutely wild. Fact 10. Built-in air stairs. Ever wonder how passengers board a 737 at tiny airports with no jet bridges? Here's the secret. Many 737s, especially ones used by budget airlines like Ryanair, have built-in foldable stairs hidden in the front and rear doors. The plane literally carries its own staircase tucked into the fuselage. When it's time to board, flight attendants just unfold the stairs and passengers walk right up. No need for airport stairs or jet bridges. The plane is completely self-sufficient. It's such a simple, clever feature, and once you know about it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Fact 9. Periscope, to check the landing gear. This one's going to blow your mind. Early Boeing 737s had a manual backup way to check if the landing gear was actually down before landing. Here's how it worked. If the cockpit indicators were broken or questionable, the pilot would walk into the passenger cabin, lift up a piece of carpet in the aisle, and find a small glass window built into the floor. Through a series of mirrors, basically a periscope, the pilot could look down and visually see the main landing gear to confirm it was locked in place. Imagine being a passenger and watching your pilot peel back the carpet and stick their face to the floor to take a peek at the wheels. That's peak 1960s engineering right there. Old school, simple, and honestly kind of genius. Fact 8. A 1950s fuselage in the 21st century. Here's something that'll mess with your head. The Boeing 737's fuselage, the main tube of the plane, is basically the same design as the Boeing 707 from the 1950s. Boeing deliberately made it 148 inches wide, exactly 1 inch wider than the rival Douglas DC-8's cabin. A Cold War-era design decision that still dictates how you sit on a 737 today. That's why 737 seats feel a bit narrower than an Airbus, because you're sitting in a tube designed in the Eisenhower administration, The nose, the cockpit layout, even the overall structure, all traces back to the 1950s. When you fly a 737, you're literally inside a flying time capsule. Fact 7. NASA's dual cockpit, 737. Let's talk about NASA 515, the very first Boeing 737 ever built, the prototype, the one that started it all. NASA bought it and turned it into a flying laboratory with one very weird modification. It has two cockpits. One cockpit is in the normal place in the nose for safety. But NASA installed a second fully functional cockpit in the forward cabin where first-class seats would normally go. Research pilots sit in this cabin cockpit to test experimental aviation technology while a safety pilot up front makes sure nobody dies. It's bizarre, it's genius, and it shows that the 737 is more than just a people mover. It's a platform for pushing aviation technology forward. Fact 6. Fighter jet in disguise. If you think that last fact was weird, buckle up. There's a Boeing 737-300 called Catbird that was modified to test systems for the F-35 Lightning II stealth fighter jet. And when I say modified, I mean they grafted the entire nose of an F-35 onto the front of a 737. This Frankenstein plane has a fighter jet nose, small canard wings on the sides, and inside it's packed with F-35 combat avionics and even a replica F-35 cockpit. Engineers fly this thing to test the fighter's radars and sensors without risking an actual $100 million F-35. A 737 wearing a fighter jet's nose like a Halloween costume. Absolutely insane. And it actually works. Fact 5. Sub-hunter with turbofans. The Boeing 737 isn't just for moving passengers, it's also a frontline military submarine hunter. The Boeing P-8 Poseidon is a heavily modified 737-800 that hunts submarines for the US Navy and other allied navies. It carries torpedoes, anti-ship missiles, sonar buoys, and advanced radar systems, all packed into a 737 airframe. This thing can drop weapons from an internal bomb bay, track enemy subs deep underwater, and coordinate anti-submarine warfare operations. It's replaced older propeller-driven sub-hunters with modern jet efficiency. So yeah, that same plane you took to Vegas last year. There's a military version out there, hunting submarines and carrying missiles. Wild. Fact 4. Flying radar tower. Continuing the military theme, meet the Boeing E-7 Wedgetail, a 737 converted into an AWACS, airborne warning and control system. It has a massive radar antenna mounted on top of the fuselage like a giant dorsal fin. This radar can scan hundreds of miles in all directions, tracking enemy aircraft and missiles, and directing friendly fighters in battle. Countries like Australia, Turkey, and the UK use these to command entire air battles from 30,000 feet. The same basic plane you flew on for your family vacation is also directing fighter jets in combat. The 737 is the ultimate multi-tool of aviation. Fact 3. The mysterious rudder crashes. Now we're getting into the dark stuff. In the early 1990s, two Boeing 737s, United Flight 585 in 1991 and US Air Flight 427 in 1994, suddenly rolled over and plummeted to the ground, killing everyone on board. Both times, the planes were perfectly fine, the weather was decent, and the pilots were experienced. Nobody could figure out what happened. These crashes became aviation mysteries for years. Finally, investigators found the culprit. A hidden flaw in the 737's rudder control system. Under certain rare conditions, the rudder could jam and deflect hard in the opposite direction the pilot intended, sending the plane into an uncontrollable roll. It was terrifying, it was deadly, and it threatened to destroy the 737's reputation. Boeing redesigned the rudder system on every 737 by the late 1990s, and the problem was fixed. But those crashes left a permanent scar on the 737's history. Fact 2. The secret autopilot scandal. Fast forward to 2017. Boeing introduces the 737 MAX, the latest, most fuel-efficient version of the 737 ever built. To save fuel, Boeing installed much larger engines. But those bigger engines changed how the plane handled, making the nose want to pitch upward in certain situations. Boeing's solution? A software system called MCAS, Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, that would automatically push the nose down if sensors detected a problem. Here's the absolutely insane part. Boeing didn't tell pilots about MCAS. Airlines didn't know it existed. Pilots flying the 737 MAX had no idea this system was even installed on their plane. Then MCAS malfunctioned. Twice. Lion Air Flight 610 in October 2018, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in March 2019. Both times, faulty sensors triggered MCAS, which forced the nose down repeatedly while confused pilots fought for control. Both planes crashed. 346 people died. The entire 737 MAX fleet was grounded worldwide in March 2019, the longest grounding in aviation history. Boeing faced criminal charges, billions in fines, and a shattered reputation, all because of a secret system nobody told pilots about. The 737 MAX eventually returned to service after massive software updates and pilot training, but the damage was done. This scandal will haunt Boeing forever. Fact 1. The 737 that lost its roof and survived. And now, the story we teased at the beginning. The most incredible, terrifying, miraculous fact about the Boeing 737. April 28, 1988. Aloha Airlines Flight 243. A routine 35-minute island hop in Hawaii from Hilo to Honolulu. A 19-year-old Boeing 737-200 with 95 people on board. The plane climbs to 24,000 feet. Everything is normal. Then, without warning, bang! An explosive decompression rips an 18-foot section of the upper fuselage clean off the airplane. The roof, just gone, vanished. Passengers are suddenly staring at open sky. The roaring wind is deafening. Debris is flying everywhere. Oxygen masks drop. People are screaming. One flight attendant, Clarabelle Lansing, gets sucked out of the plane and is never found. The cockpit is in chaos. The pilots can barely hear each other. The controls are sluggish. The plane is shaking violently. They're flying a convertible at 24,000 feet. By all logic, this plane should have broken apart completely. The entire front section should have snapped off. Everyone should have died. But somehow, the floor beams held. The pilots kept control. They descended carefully, fighting the wind, and aimed for Kahului Airport in Maui. 13 minutes later, against all odds, they landed the crippled 737 safely. Passengers walked off the plane in shock. Investigators arrived and couldn't believe what they were seeing. Aviation expert Greg Feith later said, "No airplane had ever landed with this amount of damage before." The only thing keeping the front of the plane attached to the back was the floor structure. That's it. The 737 was literally held together by a few metal beams. This incident led to major changes in how airlines inspect older planes for metal fatigue and corrosion. It saved countless lives in the years that followed. But the real story here is this. The Boeing 737 is tough, unbelievably tough. Even when the roof gets ripped off, it keeps flying. So there you have it. 20 weird, shocking, incredible facts about the Boeing 737. This plane was almost cancelled 3 years after launch. It became the best-selling airliner in history. It hunts submarines, controls air battles, and even tests fighter jet technology. It survived a hidden rudder flaw that killed hundreds. It suffered through the worst scandal in Boeing's history with the MAX crisis, and it landed safely after losing its entire roof. The Boeing 737 isn't just a plane, it's a survivor, a workhorse, a shapeshifter, a legend. From its humble beginnings in 1967 to over 10,000 planes built, the 737 has seen it all. Triumph, tragedy, innovation, and controversy. It's carried 22 billion people. It's been modified into submarines, hunters, and radar planes. It's crashed, it's been grounded, and it's always come back. Next time you board a 737 for your flight, take a second and look around. Remember that hidden window in the floor. Glance at those scimitar winglets. Think about the fact that you're sitting in a fuselage designed in the 1950s that's somehow still flying in the 2020s. This isn't just a metal tube with wings. This is a piece of living history with stories that span decades. The Boeing 737, the most common plane in the sky and one of the most extraordinary machines ever built. Now you know the truth. If you learned something wild today, smash that like button and subscribe for more facts that will change how you see the world. Because the most ordinary things often have the most incredible stories. See you in the skies.